Hello everybody, here we are today doing a second round series preview between the Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks. So before we get started with it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. So of course we have to talk about how we got here in this series, and we got here with the Edmonton Oilers ending up making a coaching change in the season and still finished with 104 points. And once again, they made the playoffs and once again beat the Los Angeles Kings in the first round for the third straight season, this time in 5 games. As for the Vancouver Canucks, a big turnaround compared to last season. I believe they had 83 points last year before finishing with 109 this year. A huge swing. Actually, they had the biggest point differential from last season of this season in terms of movement and the positive direction, and they won the Pacific Division before beating the Nashville Predators in 6 games. So with it being said, what are some storylines to talk about as these two teams meet, I believe for the first time since the 90s in the playoffs? So the first talking point is the situation in net for Vancouver. Thatcher Demko, as we all likely know, was out for pretty much the entirety of the first round against the Nashville Predators. Thatcher was the go-to guy. He was the starter. Got over 50 starts this season and had 35 wins in that time. We've talked about that a lot, so we won't cover that as much. But of course, Casey DeSmith ends up coming in and playing games 2 and game 3 in replacement for Demko, and he gets a game 3 victory but ends up getting hurt. So what does Vancouver have to do? They have to rely on their third stringer, Artur Shilovs, and Artur's ends up having a relatively good first round. He plays games 4 through 6, goes 2-1 with a .937 save percentage in a series clinching shutout over the Nashville Predators in game 6. Huge series for him. Again, small sample size, so you're not exactly sure what you're working with. On the bright side for Vancouver, it seems like DeSmith is going to be back and he's going to be healthy for the second round, at least from what I'm reading. He's close to 100%, and Shilovs, again, was younger and able to put up a good fight in the first round against Nashville when he could have folded and the Predators could have gone on to win that series. So that is something to look forward to. On the downside, Demko is reportedly likely to miss the second round. I did these notes at about 5 in the morning, and I didn't have a whole lot of definitive information about him coming back at all for the second round matchup against the Oilers. So if he is truly out for this series, that is going to be a little bit of a blow, but I kind of view that as a slight positive in the sense that he could get some more time to heal up, and you don't have to worry about the other two goalies saying, oh my gosh, what if we have to worry about just losing the job to Thatcher because he was the starter at the beginning of the year, even if I'm playing well. But again, the playoffs get kind of weird with who you're going to be starting in net, especially if they're hot. But at the same time, I do want to point out that the Oilers are a totally different beast when it comes to offense this year compared to the Predators. At 5-on-5 play this year, they ranked 3rd in the league for goals for per 60. They ranked 4th in even strength for goals for per 60. And on the power play, they ranked 2nd in goals for per 60. So a team that you know can go out there and score a ton of goals and can create a lot of problems for you. I would say that I would expect different guys to start in net for this series, as the Oilers could go out there and get a game where they just run away with it. And if you see DeSmith and Shilovs out there playing different times in this series, maybe, again, where they go back and forth, Talkett trying to figure out what he wants to do here, that's not necessarily a bad thing, as you're just trying to find the right guy, I guess, for the moment, whether or not that is going to be DeSmith going out there and playing the entirety of the series and winning it, or Shilovs, whoever the case is. I do think that it's just going to be a situation where it's not going to be like that. Again, they're probably going to have to go out there and just see who is going to play well that game. And the second talking point is going to be where these teams are versus where they were. So at the start of the year, you had the Canucks that were able to pick up 3 early wins against the Oilers, and they were able to finish with 109 points, and that's a 5-point cushion for the Canucks over the Oilers. There was a lot of talk, though, when the Oilers were able to get hot about how this team was going to come back and they were going to win the division. Ultimately, it didn't end up happening, but let me tell you, on social media, things were incredibly toxic during this time between both fan bases, as some people, I don't think, always understand that it's a joke. Other people are more serious, and it just got really heated as you see these two teams trying to battle it out, and of course battle for the Pacific Division, but now meeting in the playoffs. So you're going to have somebody that's going to be very unhappy here when this series is done, because somebody's going to be keeping the receipts, going back to those comments and being like, oh, remember how you talked all this trash about us? Guess what? We just knocked you out of the second round, and that's just why you don't want to talk a whole lot of trash on social media. Now, for Vancouver fans, you could probably argue that they have the right to, if you will, in a respectful manner, because they ended up outscoring the Oilers 21-7 in the series and had all 4 wins in the matchups they played against each other in regulation. But I got to be honest, again, this is where they are now compared to where they were. The Canucks started out the year extremely hot and then ultimately had a bit of a skid to close out the season. Nothing crazy, but they did lose 14 of their last 27 games, whereas the Oilers, when Knoblauch ended up taking the coaching spot from Jay Woodcroft, ended up having the best points percentage in that time. Actually would have given them the President's Trophy if they played at that pace. And the reality is, too, these matchups, especially the early matchups where they played each other 3 times in the opening month of the season, that is so long ago that I don't realistically think you can count it. And while the Oilers did lose 4 of their past 5 games of the regular season, they went on and made pretty light work of the Los Angeles Kings in the first round. Meanwhile, Vancouver, without Demko, struggled towards the end of the year, like I said, and in the first round it was a tough battle against the Predators. So all I'm saying here is, at the end of the day, I think a lot of Vancouver fans that are a little bit delusional would say, oh well, we beat them every time in regulation, and we had that 8-1 win, and we had that 6-2 win, I think it was, so we're going to go out there and just, sweep them. That right there, I don't think is a huge crowd of people. But if you are believing that, I need to have whatever confidence you've got going in this series, as to me, this is going to be a much tighter battle than the regular season matchup was between these two, as the Oilers look better compared to where they were at the beginning of the year, whereas the Canucks look worse. And the third talking point for me is going to be Edmonton Stars versus Vancouver Stars. Looking at this series, I think a lot of times I look at some other matchups and I try to talk about whether this fourth line will win a matchup or special teams, or how that'll work out, how a goalie will do. But in this case, I really do think that this series could be defined by how Edmonton Stars do compared to Vancouver's. Edmonton's especially has the firepower to be able to win a series alone, thanks to just a handful of guys. And looking at what they're able to do in the first round against the Kings, you had 2 players averaging 2 points per game, that being Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and 3 others able to average a point per game, one of those being Zach Hyman. He had 8 points in the 5 games with 7 goals. So looking at that trio of McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman, kind of understandable that they're going to be a huge talking point in this series. Leon Draisaitl is a guy that's able to get some speed. He's a fast skater and is just a player that's able to have another 100+ point season, and has somehow sneakily crept up on 1,000 career points, even though he just doesn't seem like he's been in the league that long. Maybe I'm just kind of oblivious to the fact. I know he's been around for a minute, but it just seems crazy to me. He is definitely a game changer in the series, whether that's going to be on the power play, whether he is able to use that speed at 5-on-5 to try to get a goal or help out somebody else. He is one of the other players in this matchup that I think could average a point per game. And as for Zach Hyman, you already know the deal here, as he had 54 goals on the season. I just want to point out, though, that he did have 0 against the Canucks in the 4 regular season games. I don't really look into that a whole lot, because the first 3 were, again, early in the season, part of the first 12 games for him, where he scored 4 goals, and then the following 68 games he scored 50 goals. So looking at that right there, we were able to average almost a goal per game on a huge stretch like that is just insane. Somebody that can go out there and have a hat trick, he was able to do it in the first round, is a serious threat, as he could go out there and get a strong net front presence, make life difficult for the Canucks. And again, people will say he's standing in front of the net. Yeah, but he's scoring 7 goals in a series. So what exactly is your takeaway here, and what is your point, I guess? And as for Connor McDavid, I really don't know what you want me to say here, as he has been able to have another incredible season and is somebody that is a future Hall of Famer. And he had an incredible season yet again this year. He is creeping up on 1,000 points. He is closer than Draisaitl is. He's going to hit it next season, and is somebody that if he retired today, would he be in the Hall of Fame? Talking point there for you, if you will. I look at him and see somebody that had 12 points in the first round in 5 games. Absolutely mind-boggling. He had 5 assists in the first night of the series. That was the first player to do so in the 21st century. 11 assists on the series, and if he ends up scoring goals in this matchup, you're just going to be in for a world of hurt. He's fast, he's good, he can dish out the puck, he can score. It's just going to be a nightmare trying to figure out what to do with him in this series, as well as the fact that you've got the other 2 of the big 3, and then you've got the supporting cast that's able to average a lot of points as well. As for the Vancouver Canucks, their trio consists of Hughes, Miller, and Pettersson, and yes, I don't think that any of these players are as good as McDavid, but they are still household names in the league. Looking at Quinn Hughes, he is seen as one of the better offensive defensemen in the league, and ended up having 5 points in the first round against Nashville. Now, people probably were hoping for more. Either way, I think that if he's able to either have a game where he goes off, or he has a game where he's able to contribute on a nightly basis with these points, it's going to be big, as he plays a ton of minutes. Maybe he's not going to go out there and play the most physical game. However, he is going to go out there and give you a lot of those minutes, help you out offensively, and maybe, just maybe, be able to be the X factor in this series as they try to move on to the second round, despite the Oilers being a good team themselves. As for JT Miller, he is somebody that had over 100 points on the season and had a shooting percentage of nearly 20%. Now, it was just a shade over 19, but still an incredible year for him. And I think the big thing for Miller is the fact that he's played so many playoff games already in his career, played nearly 100 at 84, played a lot with the Rangers and the Lightning. Now here with Vancouver, of course, he's going to be tasked with trying to be a leader for this team and try to get them to where they want to be. He has 24 points in 23 career playoff games with Vancouver, and if he's going to have a big series and lead this team for points, it's going to be a nice thing, as they don't have to worry about who's going to be helping them out. And Miller, like Hughes, hoping to have a nice series. As for Elias Pettersson, he is somebody that's being talked about a lot, as he had 17 points over his final 27 regular season games, and then he just had 3 points in 6 games in the first round, averaging half a point per game as a player that signed an 8-year extension. Isn't exactly ideal, and I get that, but at the same time too, he had good underlying numbers. Now, I know that all of these were assists, that were secondary assists, but you're looking at this and you have to understand that Nashville was able to play a little bit differently, as Vancouver was a team that was relying on the third string goalie. They weren't getting a lot of shots, and Nashville was. They had some moments where in the third, they might have been trying to hold on for a win. I do think against Edmonton, the Canucks might try to open it up a little bit more because they know that they have to be aggressive as well. And Pettersson hopefully is able to get on a bit of a heater. Looking at this too, a lot of people have been talking about whether he's injured or not. I don't think we've got a confirmed answer at the moment from what I could find, but I do know this: it's a playoffs. Guys are going to be battling through injuries, so I wouldn't be surprised that if they lose in this series or they go on to win the Cup, we find out that answer by the end of the season. So overall, what are my thoughts for this series and just some of the things we're going to be hearing about? Well, one of these things is the fact that this is an all-Canadian matchup, and if one of these teams is able to win, which they will do because they're only playing each other, they're going to be going on to the conference final, and you would at least have a shot at a team making it to the Stanley Cup final that's Canadian. So expect there to be a crazy amount of coverage, and the hype is going to be unreal. Also expect from each fan base to be a ton of overreactions after every single game, regardless if they win or lose. You know the passion that these fan bases bring, and you know that some of them, again, can be a little bit delusional compared to what's happening in reality. And I would absolutely say expect a ton of talk to be made about Vancouver's goalie situation, as if they get off the slow start in this series, that is going to be a huge thing you hear about on any major hockey network. So with that being said, who am I picking in this series? I'm going to be picking the Edmonton Oilers in 6 games. Looking at this, I just think that the loss of Thatcher Demko may be too great for the Canucks, and I think it's going to be a huge issue here. The Canucks also struggled to get zone entries this season, and at a shooting percentage that was way higher than what was actually expected in terms of their expected goal total. Edmonton is better at getting into the zone, and they have a ton of guys that can go out there and score goals for them. So if this turns into a shootout, especially with how things are shaping up at the moment, I do think the Oilers have a bit of an advantage here, and that is going to be possibly a huge issue for Vancouver if they go down like 2-0 early in the series. And you do have an issue of who's going to step up for the Canucks at the moment if their stars don't produce. Hronek ended up having a pretty good regular season, but was really cold to finish off the year, as well as in the first round of the playoffs. 0 points in 6 games. Who's going to be here? Who's going to be the guy that can end up stepping up for them? Is it going to be Dakota Joshua? Is it going to be, somebody like Suter? It all is going to depend. And the question remains, is that going to be enough? And you go from Canucks fans that were just bragging about winning 8-1 to potentially, in the worst case scenario, which I don't think will happen, to them getting swept. But we will see, hoping for a good series regardless, hoping for a Game 7 as always. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this series? Who do you think will win and in how many games? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you go hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.